The first book vanished while I was holding it. 1 second, my thumb rested between 2 pages of A Brief History of Calder County. The next, the paper simply stopped. No tear, no missing fragments. The binding ended cleanly like the rest had never been printed. I checked the catalog. 412 pages. I counted twice. 214. Wexler Carnegie Library had closed to the public weeks earlier for digitization, and I'd taken the overnight archivist job because it sounded easy. Scan books, log them, go home before sunrise. Nothing of value was being lost, the town committee told me. But standing there under the dim reference lights, staring at a book that had clearly rewritten itself, I felt the first crack in that promise. Behind me, wood slid softly against wood. I turned. The card catalog drawer across the room was opening on its own. It glided outward until it stopped with a gentle knock. Then one of the cards lifted, slowly, deliberately, before settling back into place. "Hello?" My voice sounded too loud in the empty library. That was when I saw her. At the end of the stacks stood a woman beside the returns cart. I hadn't heard her enter. She wore outdated clothes, a high-buttoned cardigan, long skirt, and held several catalog cards against her chest. Her face looked wrong. Not distorted, just unfocused, like my eyes couldn't quite lock onto it. "You're here late?" I said. She didn't respond. Instead, she stepped forward and slid a card into the open drawer with careful precision. When I blinked, she was gone. No footsteps, no closing door, just an empty aisle. Uneasy, I returned to the computer. A notification pulsed onto the screen. Record updated, page count adjusted, 214. My stomach tightened. As I stared at it, another word appeared beneath the listing. Deaccessed. I didn't know what it meant then, but when I looked back at the shelves, I could have sworn there was a gap where another book used to be. And I had the sudden, impossible feeling the library was beginning to edit itself. By the fourth night, I stopped trusting the shelves. Books shifted when I wasn't looking. Call numbers crept out of sequence by single digits. Titles I swore I'd scanned the night before reappeared on the pending list, flagged for removal again. The catalog, however, never forgot. Every vanished book remained listed. Complete metadata, intact summaries, correct publication dates, except for one detail. The page counts kept shrinking. I started cross-checking older records, pulling entries that referenced events I remembered from growing up in Calder County. A factory fire, a flooded subdivision, a protest that shut down Main Street for a week. The books still existed, but when I opened them, the events were gone. The fire was downgraded to a minor incident. The flood never reached the houses. The protest ended peacefully before it began. The next morning I mentioned it to a contractor from the day crew. He frowned. That stuff never happened. I didn't argue. I went back to the stacks and found the history book again. When I opened it, a loose card slipped from between the pages and landed at my feet. An overdue notice. No due date, no borrower, just a single stamped word. Returned. Behind me, paper rustled. I turned slowly. The woman stood between the aisles this time, closer than before. The light bent strangely around her, refusing to settle. She pointed at the book in my hands. Then, in a voice barely louder than the air moving through the vents, she said, "Do not reshelve what you did not remove." I swallowed. Why? Her eyes, or where her eyes should have been, lingered on the shelves behind me. "Because," she said carefully, The catalog decides what remains. The lights flickered. When they steadied, she was gone. I wrote the sentence down on a sticky note and taped it to my monitor. That night, I left 3 books on the cart instead of returning them. By morning, only 2 remained. I stopped asking questions out loud after that. Instead, I watched. Every night around the same time, the catalog drawers shifted. Cards slid forward. Entries rearranged themselves with quiet, methodical care. Whatever was happening here followed rules, just not ones written down. I started pulling old checkout cards from books scheduled for removal. Most were blank, untouched for decades. One wasn't. The same name appeared again and again, written in neat, careful script. E. Whitlock. No dates, no initials beyond the first letter. Just repetition, like someone signing their name to prove they still existed. I searched the staff records. No Whitlock had ever worked at Wexler Carnegie Library. That night she appeared as I stood at the desk, the glow of the monitor bleeding through her shape. She looked clearer now, still blurred at the edges but closer to solid. Her clothes were the same, her posture perfect. "You're not in the system," I said before I could stop myself. She tilted her head. "I was," she replied. Her voice carried the soft authority of someone used to enforcing silence. "Before removal." "Removal from what?" She reached past me and tapped the keyboard. The screen filled with a single entry. "Status, deaccessed." "That doesn't mean destroyed," she said. "It means no longer necessary." My throat tightened. "And you?" Her mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. "I was last checked out," she said, "and never returned." The lights dimmed. The hum of the scanners deepened. As she faded, one final catalog alert blinked onto the screen. New entry. Created. I leaned closer. The title field populated itself letter by letter. Night Archivist. In progress. My name appeared beneath it. And for the first time since taking the job, the library felt impatient. I didn't find the basement in the catalog. I found it by accident. Near the end of my shift, a returns cart rolled gently into my path, nudged by nothing I could see. One book rested on it, bound in cracked green leather with no call number on the spine. Inside the cover, a label read, "Unindexed. Do not scan." An arrow had been drawn beneath it. It pointed toward a narrow service door I'd always assumed led to storage. The stairwell beyond breathed warm, stale air that smelled faintly of glue and dust. The temperature climbed with every step down, like the room itself was being preserved. Shelves filled the basement wall to wall, but these were older. No barcodes, no routing slips, no digitization tags. I pulled a random volume. It described a hotel that once stood 3 blocks from my apartment. I'd never heard of it. The photos showed crowds gathered outside after a collapse that supposedly killed dozens. Yet, I had walked that block hundreds of times. Nothing was there. "You shouldn't be here." Her voice startled me. Whitlock stood at the foot of the stairs, less transparent than before, tension visible in the rigid line of her shoulders. "Why keep these?" I asked. "Because they are remembered," she said quickly. "What is unindexed cannot be removed." I slid the book back. Removed by who? Before she could answer, a scanner somewhere upstairs powered on with a low mechanical whine. For the first time, Whitlock looked afraid. "Never read aloud from these shelves," she said. "Sound helps them find what was missed." The overhead bulb flickered. As we climbed back toward the main floor, I noticed a thin label fixed to the stair rail, one I was certain hadn't been there before. Basement collection, scheduled for digitization. Whitlock stopped cold. "They are expanding," she whispered. And suddenly the library didn't feel like it was editing the past anymore. It felt hungry. The first basement book disappeared before sunrise. I knew because the catalog updated at 4:12 a.m. Basement collection. Item removed. No title, no author, just removed. I rushed downstairs and found an empty space on the shelf where the green volume had been. The dust outline remained, untouched, like the book had simply decided not to exist anymore. Upstairs, the scanners were running on their own. Every station glowed blue, feeding books into their trays with slow, careful movements. The machines weren't copying text, they were replacing it. Each time a scan completed, the physical book felt thinner in my hands, lighter, like memory being leached out page by page. Whitlock stood beside me, her outline flickering. "This was never preservation," she said. "It's revision." "Who authorized this?" I asked. She gestured vaguely upward toward the town offices beyond the walls. "Those who benefit from forgetting." I checked the server logs. The earliest digitization file wasn't a book. It was a personnel record. Whitlock, E. Status, deaccessed. "They tested it on me," she said quietly. "A person is only a story, after all." My chest tightened as the system chimed again. A new entry populated the removal queue. Night Archivist, final review. Beneath it, a subline appeared. Page count, in progress. Whitlock reached for my arm, her hand briefly solid. "If the catalog finishes you," she said, "no one will remember you were ever here." The scanners accelerated, and somewhere in the stacks, another empty space opened, waiting. "Write it down," Whitlock said. The scanners had already claimed half the basement by then. Empty gaps spread shelf to shelf, the dust outlines multiplying like quiet warnings. "The system cannot erase what is not cataloged," she continued. "Not if it exists somewhere else first." So we made a book. Not on the computers. She refused to go near them now, but by hand, using a blank ledger pulled from a supply cabinet older than both of us combined. I wrote everything. The vanished river incident, the rewritten disasters, the town's careful edits, Whitlock herself. As the pages filled, something changed. Her voice strengthened, her edges sharpened. When she turned, her skirt whispered against the floor, a sound I was almost certain ghosts weren't supposed to make. "They reduced me to a line item," she said softly as I finished the final paragraph of her life. "But a recorded story is harder to silence." Upstairs, alarms pulsed. Automated digitization initiated. Basement priority. "They've detected the gap," Whitlock said. I scrawled the last sentence, dated it, then hesitated before printing my own name beneath the author line. The moment the ink dried, the lights surged. For the first time since I'd met her, Whitlock looked fully real. She placed her hand over mine, warm now. "You must shelve it where the catalog cannot assign it," she said. "Unnumbered, unlisted." The scanners roared louder, hungry. I slid the ledger between two warped volumes and pushed it deep into the forgotten shelf. The alarms stopped. Whitlock exhaled, steady for the first time. Then she began to fade. Not erased, released. And as the silence returned to the stacks, I understood something with terrible clarity. The system hadn't stopped. It had simply chosen the next story to finish. Mine. By morning, the scanners were silent. The basement no longer appeared on the digitization schedule. When the day crew arrived, they moved through the building with casual efficiency, unaware anything had ever been at risk. I tested it carefully. "Do you remember Whitlock?" I asked one of the contractors. He shook his head. "Never had anyone by that name." But the ledger remained exactly where I'd hidden it. Unlisted. Untouchable. Weeks passed. The removal queue cleared. No new gaps formed on the shelves. Whatever the system had been doing, it seemed satisfied now. Finished. I tried to quit once, packed my bag, walked straight to the front doors and pushed. They didn't open. Not locked, just unmoving, as if the building itself no longer recognized me as someone permitted to leave. That was when I noticed the small brass plate newly fixed beside the circulation desk. I was certain it hadn't been there before. Archivist. Active. No name beneath it. There didn't need to be. The night routines came naturally after that. I repaired damaged bindings, corrected misfiled cards, kept the catalog honest, by hand. Sometimes, when the air settles just right, I hear the faint scratch of a pen from the basement shelf where the ledger rests. Not writing. Breathing. Waiting. Occasionally, a visitor wanders in just before closing and pauses, frowning at the stacks like they almost remember something important. I always guide them back toward the exit. Carefully. Some stories deserve to survive. Others are safer forgotten. If you ever find yourself in an old library after dark and notice a space on the shelf that feels recently filled, don't pull the book free. And whatever you do, don't check the catalog for your name. If you made it to the end of tonight's story, let me ask you something. If a library could erase parts of history, erase people, would you want to remember the truth or be spared from it? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video. It helps more horror fans find their way to the fire. Subscribe to Campfire Horror Stories for more slow-burn nightmares set in forgotten places, strange jobs, and quiet towns where something is always just slightly wrong. Turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Because out there, in some old building with the lights still on, another shelf might already be waiting for you.